Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some HTML components that we're going to do this week. We're going to cover just a few additional tags, and we're going to do some examples about how to use them. We're going to talk about including images in your page. We're going to talk about using clickable images. So we're going to combine the image and the A tag or the anchor tag. And then we're going to do a quick review of how to put special characters on the page. So if you want to put HTML code on your page, there's a way to do that using special characters as well as other characters, currency symbols and copyrights and things like that. So, there's we'll do a little quick lesson on that. And then we're going to talk about building tables so that you can start creating some formatted content. Again, we're just doing HTML right now. We're not getting into too much of the styling, so our pages are going to be pretty bare bones. All right, so let's get through this. There's a little bit of reading that was in the module, so you'll be able to go through that, as well as a couple of reference pages on the internet. There's some great tools out there to help you with this kind of basic introduction to HTML. So those things are easy to find. Okay, so I have my Visual Studio set up. I'm in my class folder. So this is my folder for the class. I have a subfolder for each week. And in week 4, I've already gone ahead and created a subfolder. I have an assignment folder. This is where I'm going to put my homework. I don't have anything in there yet because I haven't started working on that. I've also created a folder called examples, and this is what we're going to be working in. So we're going to be working in my project folder, week 4 examples, and that's where we're going to put our HTML. So I've already created an index.html. It sits in the examples folder here. And I've created a subfolder called images, and I've put a couple of images in there just to save us time. So you need to build the same structure. So I hope that you have a single folder on your computer where you're putting all of your work. So create a folder for this week's exercises, create a folder for examples to keep your homework separate, and then create a subfolder for images, and then put your index in the examples folder. So the folder structure here is very important because we're going to be using some relative links for the images. So you need to make sure that your folder structure is good. Okay, so I have my index HTML here. The first thing I want to do is I've got Visual Studio Code running. Again, I have Copilot turned off. Copilot's a great tool. The AI tools are tremendously helpful, but we're not using them here because we're trying to learn some foundational stuff. So, but you will absolutely be using these later in your career. But in this course, we are not going to use them. So I need to get a basic page. So VS Code lets me put in just a single exclamation point, and I can get my boilerplate for my page done. I'm going to go ahead and add my title. The title is going to be images, escaping, and tables. Okay. And then I'm going to put all my work here in the body. So it's important. Structure of your HTML code is important. The browser doesn't care if it's structured properly, but you will as you try to edit it. The more work we do in HTML, the more complex our pages get, the more there's going to be a lot of code. And so we want to make sure that we keep it indented, that we keep everything right, in the right sections. We have our head section, our body section. Remember, all of the content for the user goes in the body section. You don't want anything before or after that's intended to render on the page. The head and the footer of the page or of the HTML file are being used for things like the title, things that tell the browser what to do. We'll be putting other includes in there when we get into style sheets and JavaScript. We'll be including those things through the head. Everything that you're rendering for the user goes between the body tags. Most browsers will be pretty accommodating if you mess this up. If you have poorly formatted HTML, usually the browser will figure it out. It's going to render something. A lot of times it's going to get it right, but the point is you need to make sure it's right, because if you have a mistake in here, then it becomes very hard to find if you have 700 or 800 or 1,000 lines of code in this file and a very complex, long page with a lot of content. Okay, so here we are. So first things first, let's just we'll put some headers and some dividers just so that we can kind of keep our page separate. So let's go ahead and put that in. Let's go ahead and do a header. Let's do an H1, and we'll just name our section. So we're going to do, this is going to be image exploration, and we'll put and we'll put a HR tag there. Remember, the HR tag is a void tag or a singleton tag, so we can make sure we don't need to close that one. We'll do a second section. This one is going to be for escape characters. We'll do another set divider, and then our last page will be for table exploration, how to build a table. Okay. Notice that my VS Code is helping me with in tags. So when I open a tag, when I type a tag, it automatically gives me the closing tag. That's great, right? Unless I delete this tag and now I have one that's kind of floating. It's not there, or maybe I want to change this to an H2. Notice it didn't change the one at the end. So these helpful tools, code editing, help me typing is really great in VS Code, but you still have to be careful because it can, if you're editing a lot of code, it can get you can make a mistake and get lost in the code. Okay, so let's jump into the images. So um, images are used, you can put an image on the page using a void tag, a singleton, that meaning that it doesn't have a close tag, and it's just the image tag, just like that. Okay, now all of the attributes of the image, what the image is, you can size them up a little bit, things like that, are all going to be as inside the tag as attributes. So there's no container for an image. Everything that we need to do is inside the tag. So we're going to put that. So these references are going to be in between the angle brackets right after the image word itself. So the key thing we're going to use in the image tag is the source attribute. This is just going to say where is the image that you want to display. Okay, now this can be an absolute link to somewhere on the website or somewhere on the web. Maybe you have an image repository. That's very common. There's these things on the website called CDNs, or content delivery networks. These are places where people put static images, things that never change, images, some style sheets, things that change very, very rarely. They put into these image delivery or content delivery networks so that they're easy to get to and they load fast and things like that. So those use absolute references. Typically, what we're going to do for images is those are likely going to be included as part of our project, depending on what the image is. And so in this case, I have an images folder. I've created a subfolder, and I have put some images in it. So I have a picture of a cat. You can click on these in VS Code and you can see what they look like. I've got a big image. This image is large, 3600 by 3400 space. This is a very large image. My laptop is only 1440 wide. It's a 14-inch laptop. I've got a 32-inch external monitor that's about 4,000 wide, but this is a very large image. So images you take on your phone, digital cameras, those images tend to be quite large, and so they need to be scaled down size-wise in order to fit on the page. I picked up just a couple of logo. Here's a logo off a website, and here's a Google Doodle that I went back and got from their Google Doodle library. You can tell that this image is this checkered background. I hope you can see that on the video. This checkered background means that the image is transparent. So the background of this image is transparent. So whatever you see, whatever this goes on top of, the background is gonna show through. So if you have a colored page, maybe you're putting this onto a web page that has a gray background or a blue background or something like that, it's gonna flow through. So our web pages are all white, but just be aware that you can have images with transparent backgrounds. These images are not. You can tell this image has a white background. So wherever you put this, it's going to block out whatever behind it. Okay, so I have images and they're in a subfolder called images. So let's go back to our index. Let's just put an image on the page. Let's just put the cat image on the page. Let's put a little paragraph that says this is an image of a cat. And let's put our image in a paragraph. Let me do that again because something just happened there. So when I want to include this image tag that I've already put on the page, I want to put it inside a paragraph. But notice when I put my opening paragraph tag, it automatically puts the close tag for me, but I want this image to be inside the tag. This is an example there of where the typing is not always going to help you. So I'm going to manually move that tag to the end. Okay, so now my image is inside a paragraph. I'm typically going to use a paragraph for everything. I'm very rarely just going to put content on the page without some kind of content container. A paragraph, a div, it's all good. I need that because it's going to help me as I begin to move elements around the page as I style them using CSS. That is going to help me be able to target those elements. they need to be inside a tag in order for me to work on them. So the image, this is just the source is just going to be the path, the relative path to the image. So I'm going to do the current directory. So I'm going to use some nomenclature here. A period means you go use the same directory as the index. So start here. I put a slash in. I'm going to go down one directory to images, and then I'm going to put in the cat.jpg. Okay. Oops, I missed the equal sign here. So let's type that again so that we can do it right, because I missed the equal. Source equals, and then my quotes, and then we can do slash images. And notice now, because I have the tag is formatted correctly, I'm getting some type ahead help here. So I could type this out images slash, or I could just hit space, and then I use the arrow keys to move up and down here and pick the cat image. So VS Code is giving me some editing assistance there. Okay, I saved that. Let's go ahead and open that up and see what that looks like on our page. So to open this, I need to copy the absolute URL or the absolute path to this file. So I right-click on index.html. I say copy the whole path. I want the whole path, not the relative path, because I'm going to load it in my browser. I've got here on I've got a incognito window here. I like to test in incognito just to make sure that if I don't want to be logged into a website or anything like that and see, because I want to see what it's going to look like for the public. So I'll go ahead and paste my URL in there, and oops, here's my let's see, this is the wrong one. Let me find out what's going on here and fix that. Okay, so let's do that again. Copy the path, put it in here. Okay, so now we've got it straightened out. So the I had some issues there. I didn't copy and paste correctly. So anyway, so we're set properly. So here is here's our page. I can already tell I've got some spelling mistakes in there that I've made. So I'm going to go back and fix those. But here's our image. So very simply, I've just got an H1 tag. I've got a paragraph with some text, and I have an image. So this is the natural size of that image. So this image is not particularly big. I'm not sure how big that is. We can probably tell if we hover on it. Sometimes you can get a sense of how big the picture is, but this isn't that big. This is, a couple hundred pixels wide. Maybe that looks like maybe 300 or 400, maybe 500 pixels wide. So it's not a particularly large image. So so it fits nicely on the page. But using CSS, we can make the image bigger or smaller. So, we may not want to fit this image. Maybe we want it as a banner. Maybe we want it to go across the whole top of the page. Maybe we want it to be just a little icon. So even though the natural size of the image here is this, we can make it bigger or smaller on the page using CSS. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Today, we're just going to use some of the native image attributes to adjust the size a little bit. But really long term, all of the styling on the page is going to go into CSS. Okay, let's go ahead and do another image. So let's put another image. Let's put this big image on there. So this image is very large, 3600 by 3400 pixels. So it's not going to fit on our browser. So let's go ahead and let's do another horizontal tab. Let's put another paragraph. Okay. And I'm going to scale it down. So now we're going to do the image tag, put that in a paragraph, in an image tag, source equals images / big image. Close that, and then close my paragraph tag because I deleted my paragraph tag by accident. Okay, so now I have this big image. Let me fix the spelling mistakes that I had. Okay, now it's saved. So now we can go back and refresh this. Okay, so now I have my cat image is still there, but now I have this really big image. See how big this is? See, it's totally scrollable off the page. That is up and down, right and left. The image is just enormous, right? So that doesn't fit. So now there's a couple of ways I could deal with that. One, if I want to post that image, maybe I'm trying to distribute that to my users. I want to keep that image really large and big. And it's probably, if I have an image that's physically that large, 3600 by 3400 pixels, it's also probably a very large file, multiple megabytes. And so, high density, very high quality image. So I don't want to give away that 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 quality, but I also can't have it just showing up on the web page like this. So what I want to do is I want to scale it down smaller. Now, normally we would do this using CSS, but just briefly, I'm going to use another small another attribute of the image tag called height. There's one called height and there's one called width. If you only use one, height or width, then the browser will automatically set the other measure proportionally. So if I scale this to 300 on the height, it's going to scale the width to match whatever the ratio. It's going to preserve the ratio of the image, which I want to do. So let's go ahead and save that. And now when we come back and refresh, we see that my image is much smaller. So you can see this one is now 300 tall. So you can see it's about the same height, maybe a little shorter than the cat image. But I've scaled it down so that it's fitting in. This is the same image. The image in the browser that's being displayed is the same size, that huge image 3600 by 3400. I've just made it look smaller in the browser temporarily. Okay, I can also do a width here. So if I set width to equal 300, then I can go ahead and refresh that. And now we see that the page is keeping the proportion there. So this image is nearly square. So it's looking fine. But if I come in and put both of them in, so maybe I put height let's put height at 100 and width at 300. Now my image is going to skew, right? Because I'm forcing it to change the ratio of the display. And so now my image is going to skew, and you can see I start to get distortion and so forth in that. So I'm gonna take out the width. I'm just gonna leave that 300 just so that it doesn't take up too much space. Okay. All right. So that's really quick how we do those images in source. I should point out there's another tag here on the image that we should be using called the alt tag. The alt tag is if the image cannot be displayed for some reason, then the alt text is what's going to show. Okay. And so I'm just going to put those in. This is a good practice to be in. Not all pages do this, but it's a good practice to be in. If you're using a framework to do your HTML, the framework is probably going to put this in automatically. But what these alt tabs do, these alt sources do is, or attributes do, is that if the image cannot be displayed for some reason, maybe it's not found or it doesn't load properly, it's going to display this alt text as well. So there's at least some context on your web page for your user. This will also be useful to screen readers. So if you have a user who is low sight or blind and using your web page, then these alt tags can help them with navigation and understanding images because they obviously can't see the image. There is a lot of coding that goes into making web pages useful for people that cannot see them. We're not going to cover that in this class, but just know that that is a significant user base on the internet of people that cannot see your page, and so they're navigating it using assistive technology, screen readers, and such. So I'm just going to fill in this alt tab, this alt text. So now, because our images are rendering properly, when we render the page, the image loads and the alt text is not visible. But if we were to make this image unloadable for some reason, give it an invalid source, notice that now I get the alt text. Okay, so that's what happens when the alt text is there to help give your page some context if for some reason something goes wrong on the load, and also to help with these screen readers. Okay, let's put in a link. So I'm just going to pin in a quick link to Google. I'm going to put a paragraph, say this, click here to go to Google. Let's just say click the image to go to Google, and then let's put another paragraph in there. Now in this paragraph, we're going to put a link. So we're going to use the anchor tag, the A tag. And instead of content, a clickable text inside the content of the A tag, we're going to put an image. So now we have a link. Our link is going to be href to google.com. Okay. We'll just open it up in the same window. So we're not going to specify any other attributes there. Now here, normally I would put like Google. So if I wanted to put text, you remember from previous lessons, if you want clickable text, you just put it inside the content of the A tag. So we can do that. So now here's a link to go to Google. I click that, I go to Google, but let's put the Google Doodle instead. So instead of this text, I'm going to put an A tag, or I'm sorry, an image tag. So an image, I'm going to do my source equals images, and I'm going to use the Google Doodle. And here, and now let's just load that and see what it looks like. So I've saved that. I'm going to flip back over here and load it. Notice now I have this big doodle. If I click on this, I'm going to go to Google. Okay. Let's make this smaller. So let's go ahead and size that down a little bit. So let's put a height tag here. And let's just say, let's make that height 200. So let's make it small. Reload it. Okay. And here's my image. Okay. That's still pretty big. Let's switch to the width tag. This image is wider than it is tall. So let's make it smaller width-wise. Yeah, so then it still preserves it. So that way we're trying to get it down into the space that we want. This is a horizontal image, so it's wider than it is tall. It's going to go in a lot of banner positions or as logos on websites. So those images are, when you're scaling those kind of horizontal images, it's often easier to make them narrower than it is to try to make them the right height. Okay, so all right, so that covers some basics of putting images on our web page. Pretty straightforward, easy stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick talk about some escape characters. So maybe I have a paragraph and I'm doing a page that is documenting HTML design. And I want to say, click here to go to W3 Schools to learn about the paragraph tag, right? So that's what I want to do. That's what I want to display on my page. Okay. But the problem is that this P tag, this is going to be interpreted as HTML, but I want to interpret it as actual text on the screen. And then I want to be able to click on that and go into the W3 Schools page, right? So so I don't want to render this as a paragraph. I want to render it as these three characters, less than, P, greater than, okay? So if we look at what this is going to show on our web page, we have to scroll down a little bit now. You see that the P is gone. So click the logo to go to the W3 Schools to learn about and this is where the P should be, but it's not there, right? And it's actually put in a new line. So it's interpreting it as being a new paragraph, and worse, I have orphan tags. So this P doesn't have a close, so there's no close tags on this, right? So I've got orphaned text here. So the way I fix that is I use an escape sequence. So let's just move that over a little bit. So in order to get the less than, so that's this character, I want this character, less than. In order to get that, I use an escape character. So I use ampersand LT semicolon. Now that's going to render as the less than character on the page. Then I can put the P in the middle, and then I can render the greater than tag, ampersand greater than semicolon, okay? So now when I render this, I will actually see less than P greater than. So it's going to look like the HTML tag. It's going to render properly on my page. Okay, so there we go. So that's how so that's using escape characters. You use escape characters anytime you want to put something on the page that is an HTML reserved character. So double quotes, apostrophes, angle brackets. There's like some currency symbols like the euro and the yen and some of those kinds of things. There's a copyright symbol, trademark symbols, things like that. So there's a page about escape characters that will include, this is not a really common thing, but it's very common to use these less than, greater than, and the ampersand signs. The ampersand, because the ampersand is part of the escape sequence, it is now a reserved character. And so if you want to put an ampersand on your page, the appropriate way to do that is to use the ampersand escape. Okay. Sometimes if you just put the ampersand in, it's going to render properly. But if you are putting that in, you always want to use the ampersand escape tag. Okay. So now we have the escape tag, and let's go ahead and put in our image. So we'll put in an image here. source equals images, and let's do the W3 logo. And then let's put a width on that. I think that image is pretty square. Let's look at it real quick. Yeah, that image is pretty square, so it doesn't matter if we use the height or width. Let's make it kind of small. Let's put it at 100. Okay, and then we're going to want to wrap that in a link. So I forgot to put my link in, so I'm going to go back and edit. Notice that my editor is closing those tags for me in the wrong place, right? So now I'm going to have to do some editing. I'm always trying to keep my tags in order first, make sure my HTML is syntactically correct before I put in the content. Let's see, and the link to the paragraph lesson on W3 Schools. Let's see, I have that in some notes, so I'm gonna paste that in. But so it's right here. So now when I and let's open that in a new tab. Okay, so now I have a link. Click on this logo to go into the W3 Schools tutorial on paragraph tags. Okay, oops, I used the wrong logo. So let's see, it's not the Google Doodle, it's the W3 logo.png. So I'm gonna load that. Now I get the W3 Schools logo here. If I click on that, it opens up a new tab where I can go in and learn all about the paragraph tabs. Okay, all right, so W3 Schools, by the way, is a great reference tool. The site is a little slow. It's got a lot of ads on it, which doesn't make it awesome, but it is really great documentation about HTML. So if you want to learn about HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, this is a great place to go to get really quick lookup information. Okay, so here we have that's all done. Now let's keep going. So escape characters, we're not going to use those a lot, but you need to be aware of them. You will use them occasionally. Okay, so now let's talk about tables. So what we've done so far is we've done paragraphs. This is like putting text on a page, links on a page, kind of like we're writing in an email or a magazine. You know, these are intended to be readable, kind of consumable bits of text. But sometimes we want to format data. So maybe we want to include a graph or a table or something like that. So think about maybe you want to put a calendar on a page, or maybe you want to put like a little summary, a little table that has you know, some costs associated with something. Maybe it's a cost table with a total, things like that. So we can use a table. There's a couple of different ways in HTML to be able to create columns and rows on your page. Table is one of them. It is not the only way, but it is one of them, and it's commonly used. We're also going to explore other container elements in coming weeks, divs and spans and other things that can allow us to create stylable components in our page so that we can move those things around as blocks. Okay, the table tags are, there's a handful of them. Okay, so we'll just put those in a paragraph so that we can see them, explore these tags. And I don't have to escape these characters because I'm not putting the angle bracket in it, but we'll just have these here as a reminder of what we're using. So the table construct consists of multiple tags embedded within each other. So the table starts with a table. So this defines the table. This is the beginning and the end. Think of it like a body tag, right? So all of the components of the table are going to go in. And there's the header of the table. This is the top rows. These are typically the column headers. There's the body. This is where the text is. There's also another element called footer. Would be like the total rows that you have. And then so this table is the container, head, body, and foot. These just are containers for the three sections of the table. And then these actually define the rows and the cells. So TR is a table row, and then TH and TD are how we put cells in the row. So let's do an example. So TH is a special kind of cell typically used in the header. So it typically goes along with the head in the head section, but it can appear anywhere in the table. But logically, it belongs in the head. Okay, so let's build a table. So I'm just going to build a quick table. I'm not going to put any real data in it. I'm just going to put column numbers so that we can kind of see how it renders on the screen. So first thing we want to do is let's start our table. We're going to put this on multi-lines because it's going to be a fairly large construct. And so we're going to want to do some formatting on our HTML so that we can kind of visualize it as we go. First thing we want is to put the head in. So here's our header. Now in the header, we need a row. So let's put in a row, and then the row we need columns. All right. So we're going to use the TH tag here. I could use the TD tag, but to build a cell here, but I'm going to use the TH because it's going to style it. I get some default style that's going to be a little better. Okay, so let's just call this column 1. Let's do another TH column 2. Let's do a third TH for column 3. Okay. And so notice I have proper opening and closing and keeping my indentation because the table itself can become a very long construct in your code. You know, it can run into hundreds of lines if you have a really complex table. And so you want to make sure that you are keeping your indentation correct and opening closing tags and really being cautious about this. Okay, now inside the table cell, you can put any content. So I could put text here, I could put a paragraph, I could put links, I could put an image. The TH is a container for text, so I can put whatever I want in here. I'm just putting very simple text in the TH. But I could put very complex HTML inside here. I could even put another table inside the table cell if I wanted to. That's not real common, but that is something that you can do. Okay, let's render this real quick so that we can see what it looks like. We're not done with it yet, but so here's our table exploration. Actually, let's move this to the top so it's easier to look. So I'm just going to cut and paste this real quick. I'm just going to move it to the top so that we can see it on our web page easier. Okay. So here's the table that I have. Notice I have column 1, column 2, column 3. This is a table you can't really tell because there's no borders or around the cells or the rows. Typically, you would do this with CSS, and our reading material is telling us how to do that in CSS right away. We are in this course, we're doing HTML first. We're going to do some HTML basics, and then we're going to come back and start styling CSS on top of that. That's just the way that I think it's easier to learn these to get a little base foundation in HTML before you get into some of the complexities of styling. But what we can do is we can built into the browser, there's some kind of basic styling on the table. The only thing I want is I just want to be able to see the borders. So I'm going to use an attribute on the table tag called border, and I'm just going to say border equals 1. That attribute is turning red in VS Code. This is because the border attribute is deprecated. It is no longer recommended for use because of CSS. So you don't need it. You can very easily put borders using CSS, which we will see in coming weeks. But just for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to use this tag. But this is not something that you would typically use ongoing. But if I do that, now I get a little bit of border so I can see where the rows and columns are occurring. Okay, so this is helpful as I lay out the content of the table. When I actually go to the point where I'm styling it and making it look good, then I'm going to use a very different tool here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in some rows. Now after the head, I can put in the body. Now these T-head and T-body tags, they don't have any actual rendering capacity. They're just containers to help me target styling and JavaScript and dynamic behavior of the table elements. So we create a row here. And inside of my row, I'm going to use the TD tag. Notice when I did the TH tag, I got some bolding automatically. It bolded it automatically. That's just default styling of the TH tag. So on the TD tag, I can say this is going to be row 1, column 1. I'm just going to cut and paste these to save some time. This is going to be row 2, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3. Okay, let's render that and see what it looks like. So now I have a row here. Okay, so we can see that I'm building the rows and the columns. Well, I'm just going to cut and paste that just to save some typing. So this is going to be row 2. This is going to be row 3. Okay, so now when I render that, see I get 3 rows. Okay, row 1, row 2, row 3, column 1, column 2, column 3. Okay, it's up to you to keep this straight. If I put an extra row in here, maybe I get a mistake row in here. I put 4 by mistake. It's going to render it. Okay, but it's kind of sticking it off to the side, and there's no header or anything in here. So it's up to you to keep your table clean. Okay, but maybe maybe I want this bottom row. Maybe columns 2 and 3 need to be combined. I can use an attribute of the TD tag called call span, and I'll say I want this row to take up 2 columns. Okay, so now this cell now takes up 2 columns. So now even though I only have 2 TDs, I still have 3 columns. So I want to make sure that I take out that third TD tag. I'm going to leave it in there just so we can see what it looks like. But now when I render, I now have 4 columns in this bottom row because I combined this one in the bottom. So this extra TD tag now needs to come out because it's no longer needed. Okay, so I can kind of style that up a little bit. Okay, so now that's my body. Lastly, I just have the foot. So I can put the footer in. The footer also just uses the TR and the T and the TD tags. Okay, so we can just put in the total. There's no inherent styling built into the to the footer tags. If maybe you have a table, maybe it's a list of costs or something, and you want to put totals for each column or something, you can do that. Maybe you don't have a footer. Maybe what you have is a list of dates, right, or a calendar or something like that. Then maybe that doesn't have a footer. But if you had a footer on the page, this is what it would look like. So when we render that, this is what we see. Okay. All right, that's tables. And so that is that's the end of the content for what we're going to review today. We have one more lesson in this series on HTML where we're going to talk about containers. And so you'll be able to see that coming up in the module, but we're going to talk about containers and buttons and how to collect data from the user. We're going to write up some of those constructs using forms for ways for the user to enter things into your page that you can then interact with. So we'll do that next week or the next lesson, and then after that, we're going to jump into styling and making our web pages look nice.